Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to TRG 30 here, Wednesday, May the 26th. We are almost in June. The nights are still getting longer, though, which is great. Whether you are a weekly follower or joining us for the first time today, know that you're here to provocate with us on bold change for our sector's resilience. Bold change. Today, we're here to insist on change, a change that moves from demanding to invitations. And things are going to feel a little different this week because the tables are turning and I'm interviewing Jill. So get ready for your tough questions in the Q&A button there. Before we kick off though, here's what I'd like you to listen out for today in this conversation, and also to pay attention. How do you feel? What feeling reaction do you get from this discussion? Sector realities, balancing the financial necessities of now with the need for long-haul relationship planning. We're going to talk about the long haul today. Are your invitations and resources optimized for long-term, multi-year relationships? And we've talked about action each 2 weeks on TRG 30. Now's the time to make changes. What will you do differently from this conversation today? And let me welcome TRG CEO, Jill Robinson. Hi, Jill. Welcome to TRG 30.
Funny this, but thank you. I'm glad to be here. And it was lovely watching you introduce this and welcome us all. It's terrific.
Pleasure. I was channeling my inner Jill there. But let's get to today's conversation and how we led to this today. Last week, Jill, you wrote a blog in response to an article that David Rode published earlier this month. His article was about philanthropic practices at the Met Opera that included telefunding solicitation to first-time ticket buyers. And this got you really fired up. And first of all, I want to ask why, and for you to take us through your thinking that led to that blog.
Yeah, it did. And from the 50,000 foot level, here's why. The worry that I have is that even in the context of the pandemic awareness that we all have now about the critical importance of the relationship between our organizations and our community, our patrons, our audiences, I am worried that this prioritization was situational to this pandemic. That as we're getting ready to open up, we're going to discover that we haven't really changed our thinking or our planning or our priorities. So what do I mean by that? David's article about the Met, it reminded me that pre-pandemic, we had practices that were less about relationships and a whole heck of a lot more about transactions and revenue. And in the context of this reopening that some of you are doing right now and that we're getting primed to do this summer and fall, all of a sudden I was tweaked and realized, oh God, the pressure is going to be ferocious on everyone in this room for us to return to normal in terms of income streams, and the pressure to start focusing on the return of income and fast income, I fear will come at the expense of sustainable relationships and revenue. And the irony is that we've gotten real practice during this pandemic. Now, it was kludgy. It happened to us, our need to practice to patrons or practice patron relationship management. We had to respond to the operational questions that ticket bookers had and that subscribers had. We had to satisfy members and donors. We needed to steward them. We needed to talk about the cash we held, and boy, so many of us needed to hang on to that cash. We needed to curate and steward and inspire our communities and patrons to continue to invest in arts and culture during a time when we weren't performing. We did this in our homes really quickly. We had to figure that out. We did it with less staff. It was hard work, but we got a lot of practice at it. And my fear, as I described, is that this practice will be viewed by us as a need that was for this time and place. And now we're back to live, and we're going to go back to campaigns and jazz handing and looking at response rates and money and this year's income and working really hard to return to that and jump over all of the things that we've gotten more practiced at. And then I got even more fired up, to use your word, because I realized we've been talking about this for decades at TRG. And you all have been thinking about it, I know, on and off for a long time. And yet here we are again. Here David was again talking about the same thing, inviting first-time buyers, first-time attendees to become donors. And at TRG, many of you know that we use a dating framework. It's a metaphor, but in our parlance, it's like asking someone to run off to Vegas and get married. And yeah, a lot of people will do it, but it's not, the data tells the story over and over again. It's not in our long-term interest. And so I am not a cynical person. I am definitely a glass half full person. I believe and want to inspire us as a field to have a posture that thinks long-term. And we've been talking about posture, Stephen, you and I, since last spring. The posture of we are prepared to continue to relate to you, patron community, in an ongoing long-term way, the infinite game, right? This pandemic and the realities of it need to be put in the context of a long story where our communities say, of course, arts and culture is critical to the way our community is. We can't imagine our community without a thriving arts and cultural community. It means so much to us. And we do that by attending to relationships in the same way we attend friendships and any other relationship. So it really got my attention, and I'm glad we're talking about it today because we're on the precipice of this action, and I want to get a conversation started about it.
Okay, thank you. And you referenced some data in there, and I want to talk about data because, as you say, we've been measuring data points for years, and we have some data about audience churn, the leaky bucket, right? One of our greatest challenges and opportunities facing the sector that will continue post-pandemic, of that we're sure, right? On one hand, what we know is that we're really successful at prospecting and bringing in new people. And on the other hand, we're pretty lousy at maintaining those relationships. Right. So I'm going to share 3 data points just to get us grounded in data before we continue the conversation, Jill. Yep. 3 data points that have not really changed since we started calculating them from millions of transactions, what, 15 years ago. So let's start with this one. On aggregate, year on year, 65% of your single ticket, regular ticket buying, those not buying as part of a package or with a discount with a membership offer, 65% of your ticket buyers are new each year. Pull this data point, see how this looks historically before the pandemic in your database. Typically, we see it to be around the 65% mark. Okay, so if over half of our audiences are brand new ticket buyers each year, how many of them come back? 73% on aggregate never return. And we've, you know, Jill, I'm thinking about clients I've worked with here, some of which I know are on this call today. When we first look at databases, this can wave around a little bit, but not far off this figure, right? Sometimes higher, sometimes a bit lower. All those first timers that you spent all that time, money, and energy getting into your venues, 73% of them never return. And then if we steward those folks to a deeper relationship, a membership or a subscription package, half of them they don't return to that activity after their first year. Half of them don't return to that activity in the first year. How do these data points look in your organization? How did they look before the pandemic? I would encourage you to look and get these metrics for yourselves. So Jill, they're sobering data points. And every time I look at them, I'm like, this can't be right. This can't be real. And your point, they're not changing. Why? Why are they not changing?
Well, they are changing in some organizations. So we're going to share some of those stories because if it wasn't changing anywhere, I think I'd need to find a new job. It does change in some places where there are different kinds of variables at play, but there are three big reasons why it doesn't change in the aggregate in arts and culture. The first is staff churn. Now, certainly in the context of the pandemic, there has been that, but even prior, we know executive leaders churn and change jobs. So do departmental leaders. And so when an executive leader says, okay, I get it. I want to change. I've seen the data or heard of it. I want to change the mechanics of the way this thing operates. Or a marketing or development director says that. Because our governance structures and our governance systems don't insist on this kind of attention, when that change happens, then a new person comes in that may or may not ascribe to that kind of philosophy or approach. And it takes time, it takes planning, it takes work to develop relationships. We know this in the context of personal relationships. It takes investment. And so because our governing boards aren't insisting to see this math, they too are very short-term in their thinking. When that churn happens, it doesn't have a consequence at a higher level. So that's the first. The second is our incentive systems. And a big incentive system is our budgeting process. I mean, even if you operate in an organization that has bonuses and incentives, the budget is the target. And I am so curious. In fact, we're going to ask you right now in this room, who of you is budgeting on a multi-year basis versus 1 year at a time? And I think our team is going to bring a poll up right now so that we can get an answer from you in real time. 1 year at a time versus 2 years or more. Right.
Thank you.
So
yeah, we're seeing what 80% so far. It's stayed around that mark right since the start of polling. Our budget 1 year at a time.
Right. So 1 year at a time means that your incentive is to be looking to achieve that particular target, revenue target, whatever it is, within that annual framework. And so the third issue is the incentives. I mean, that is the incentive, right? So why would I be thinking long-term, especially in an industry where to grow professionally, it often means I need to move from an organization to the next. So there's all kinds of sort of infrastructure reasons why I think this and see that this isn't a bigger focus. But boy, oh boy, if there was ever a time, seriously, ever a time to be thinking about multi-year budgeting, it is now. This recovery is going to be a multi-year recovery. And so being able, if you're a marketing development director and executive leader, now is the time to make the argument to your board, to your team, that we have to plan over a multi-year period. And in so doing, then we can plan the relationship management strategies, the investment strategies with an eye toward what does it look like 3 years from now when we do these things now.
Jill, I want to come back to the original provocation, and you referenced some organizations that are shifting these metrics, right? I wonder how many folks today here, how in pre-pandemic time, take yourself back to before the last 18 months, how many of you were curating campaigns to change some of these metrics? And my colleague's going to bring up another poll for you to respond to. I want to know how frequently you solicited first-time ticket bookers for either subscriptions or memberships or donations. Did you solicit for either of the following?
First time ticket booking household.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very common practice. I mean, we see the numbers that are here.
Yeah.
And of course you would. Like, of course you would. You've got leads in a database, right? You've got a marketing campaign to run. You've got a development goal to hit. So when we think about campaigns and response rates and transactions and income, we think about leads in a database. We think about leads that get a piece of direct mail or a call. But if we switch the thinking to this, it becomes cheeky, this dating analogy. We've used it for years though, because it really does shift the thinking. If I go out on a first date with someone and my next conversation with them is about getting engaged to be married, it's like, whoa. And more importantly, the data tells the story every time about the power of curating relationships over time. So it's no surprise here, what I see here, Stephen, it's not a surprise to you either. The question is, what are you doing now?
Yeah, the one thing I'm just fascinated about here is that we're asking folks to move from a single ticket one-off time relationship to a multi-show engagement with a subscription or membership. That's fast relationship movement, right?
Right. But it's because we can, and because people will respond, and because we are incentivized to provide to hit that revenue mark that's in that budget. It is no surprise. But to do something for the long haul in a way that satisfies the long game, the financial long game, and a long game is like, let's talk 3 years or 4, not 50. Different practices are required. Different practices are required.
I agree with you, Jill, and it's all fair enough, right? But if we're in a situation where revenue is a priority, even more so, right? Post-pandemic, we're talking all the time now about the tension of revenue and a desire to build strong relationship practices. Like, we all share that desire. We want to grow subscribers, members, donors in our organizations. I wonder if you can reference some of these examples where there's an and there, not an or decision in terms of revenue and relationships.
Yeah, you bet. And we've gotten for all of you some case studies. This came together really quickly because the blog came together quickly, so they're anonymized now, but these are TRG clients. Let's start with this first one. It's a North American theater company, West Coast, during the Great Recession. So it's not a pandemic, but it was a time for them of budget cuts and staff furloughs. So there are similar elements. And in that particular season, this organization had been hearing about and seeing in their data things they wanted to change. So the then marketing director took money from the acquisition budget, the marketing acquisition budget, and said, we're going to dump that into renewal. One of the provocations I will sometimes make is, imagine if we took all of our marketing resources and instead of trying to acquire new patrons, just dumped them entirely on our existing database. Now, there's lots of reasons to not do that, not least of which is that we must, from a mission and from a business point of view, make connections that are new. All of these realities apply to any kind of new or existing relationship, no matter where they come from, who they are, what they look like, how similar they are to our current, or how different. Relationship curation is the orientation, right? So this organization said, we're going to get institutional alignment, and first time ticket buyers will not be asked for anything other than to attend a second time. Now that had impacts. It had impacts on development budgets. It had impacts on subscription budgets. They got that sorted. Said, this is where we're going to put our attention. This is where we're going to expect some incremental income on the single ticket revenue side. And they got aligned. In that first season, if someone repeated up, they went down a different path. If they didn't, the next season, they were put right back into those subscription campaigns, the development campaigns, the marketing campaigns, all of it. But if they had a same season repeat purchase, they were curated over a 4-year period. And in that second year, they were invited to become a 3-pack subscriber. In the third year, they were invited to become a full 6-pack subscriber. And in the fourth year, they were invited to renew that. And the results were astounding. The lifetime value, the revenue value was triple. The retention rate was double compared to those people that were continuously invited, but they'd only attended one time in a season. And interestingly, this curated group was never asked to give a gift, but gave at very surprising levels. They found their way there. So that's an example of, during a stressful financial time, someone took a particularly long-term, even though it was counterintuitive and there were pressures, path. UK Theatre, who said, oh goodness, there are things happening in the funding environment here and we need to get in front of it. And in the UK, those of you there know that subscription is something that's long been viewed as not an asset. So in this particular organization, almost everything they had in their database were single ticket booking households. But this organization said, you know what, we're going to turn the fire hose on those. We're going to create, Jill's going to have a portfolio of households that she is curating, saying hello to at the hall, calling to say, how was that? Is there anything I can help you with? And like the average that we see in the aggregate, their actual first-time booker churn rate was 73%. In 1 year, by turning that fire hose on that group of households, those first timers, they reduced that churn rate from 73 to 63%. Like unheard of, right? The third case is,
I know, just to say, Jill, I know that organization well, and and you talk about the long game, but the impact that had on ticket sales and revenue in the following years too, post this fire hose focus concentration, year-on-year impact.
Right, totally. Then there's a case of a major symphony orchestra in North America. This is one of the big ones. Big silos, big CVs and egos, big structure. And they wanted to see what data, how data discovery could help them change organizational culture and drive culture around the patron. So they began asking questions of the data. This goes back to the provocation around the Met. What they found was first-time ticket buyers whose next transactional step was a donation, 43% of them exited. But if that first-time ticket buyer took the next step as a concert, really reduced exit rate, 35% only. And when you looked over 2 years with both of those cohorts, over a 2-season cycle, those buyers who took the incremental concert to concert ticket buying step had a $300 higher lifetime value than those who took philanthropy as their second step. And I raise this because it's counterintuitive, right? We all think of philanthropy as something that signals investment and interest in mission and patronage. Not necessarily, not necessarily. The more important thing is to look at the data and curate what you know to be the next step. And what I hope these stories tell the story about is the impact financially to the organization in renewable revenue as much as renewable relationships.
Yeah. I just wonder, as folks are listening here, why is this hard? We're curious. Why is this hard? If you've got something you'd say in chat to Jill and I now about the challenges, the obstacles, the barriers in place to making this a focus in your organization, please pop them into chat now. We'd love to see. So Jill, some organizations have done this, some under financial constraints, some in a boom time, right? How would you, as these comments come in chat, how would you recommend organizations create the resources that they need for this work, which is both, I know, time and labor intensive, right? But we know produce a positive return on investment.
Yeah, so it's hard that we're seeing this come through the chat. Here are some specific things I would do. If you have surplus, and some organizations do, if you've got resources that you're going to be directing at 21-22 and 22-23, ask your board, your executive leader, yourself, which of those resources are you imagining solving an annual problem or a multi-year problem? And if the answer is only our annual issue, where is an annual answer? Where could you free up some of those resources to solve a multi-year or invest in multi-year? Can you find a funder, a donor who's interested in helping you think multi-year? If the answers to those two questions are no, then you may have to do what the theater company on the West Coast did during the Great Recession, and that is make some decisions. And that will be hard too, because we're going back to life. And I hear evidence of it. I see right now sales brochures, subscription brochures that are annual reports, because we're just so damn happy to be back. I hear evidence of our wanting to place full page ads, do television spots, use billboards. That kind of investment does not curate relationship over the long haul. It makes us feel organizationally good, but at what cost? So you will have to create strategic and data-driven arguments, and it will be hard. It's why I feel so passionately about it, because I feel this moment when you're either going to repeat what you used to do, or you'll say, no, 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 nope, we're going to do it differently.
Okay, Jill, I'm provoked. We've got a couple of minutes left. And I want to take this question from Megan, which talks further down the line, right? How do we transfer those ticket buyers from a give to get mindset into the philanthropic and ticket buying group?
The first question I'd ask is, what does your data say is the next best step, Megan, before you make an assumption that that's the next best step? That's first. And second, think relationship. So in your shoes, I would look at the panoply of resources, which may be limited, and events and options and ways for people to connect, and put on the dating hat and ask yourself what feels right on a segment by segment basis, and then test and learn. So try, we are on limited resources with limited staff. So pick a segment that either you think has the best opportunity or the most risk, and play out some scenarios, pick a couple and test them and see what the response is and what people say to your invitation.
Jill, we started with a criticism of how organizations are using phone rooms. How quickly can we use calls effectively to both for telemarketing and funding, but also to build relationships?
Yeah, telemarketing is not the problem, nor no more than direct mail is the problem or email is the problem. The channel's not the problem. It's our strategy that's the problem. It was a decade ago when I met with leaders of telemarketing agencies who were thrilled for us to be having the conversation about engaging our clients in ways that you could use telemarketing for retention purposes. And do you know who said that wasn't possible? It was you. You all said, we need the money now. We need our telemarketing firms to generate those memberships, that philanthropy, those subscriptions. So it's your strategy. The channel you can tailor to do what we need it to do. So my tactical recommendation would be engage your telemarketing firm and say, okay, I want to talk about how you can help me scale my retention efforts, because I don't have enough staff right now. How could you help us deliver thank you calls, and what's a fair price for that? And budget over a multi-year period to get that job done.
Jill, we're out of time, but thank you so much today. Please give your feedback post TRG 30. I know there's some questions we were not able to answer today. We'll make sure we get back to you. Don't forget, you can join our deeper dive webinars when we go into campaign planning around just these types of topics, and also digital marketing. We know you had a great time with James at Sign Digital a few weeks ago. He will be joining us for a deeper dive session too. 2 weeks time, we're looking at the latest findings from our COVID sector benchmark. If you're not there already, you can join up and find information about that and all of the other ways that we can support you on our website at trgarts.com. Jill, thank you. Thank you everybody for joining us today. It was great to see you all, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye.